trying to find a screencast app to cast my phone to PC, and I just couldn't find one. I think they ended Miracast because I couldn't find it for PC. I went to the Microsoft store, like through their site. I went to the Microsoft store and it wasn't there. And the only other thing I could find was Airdroid, and I fumbled with that for like half an hour and I couldn't get it to work. So this stream's gonna be kind of boring. It's just Desert Bus and Lo-Fi. I've actually already been streaming for a bit. I don't know how long. Probably close to like an hour and 5 minutes. Because this is an hour on here. Twitch. Oh, that's Twitter. This day was passed in the same routine as that which preceded it. The young man was constantly employed out of doors, and the girl in various laborious occupations within. The old man, whom I soon perceived to be blind, employed his leisure hours on his instrument, or in contemplation. Nothing could exceed the love and respect which the younger cottagers exhibited towards their venerable companion. They performed towards him every little office of affection and duty with gentleness, and he rewarded them by his benevolent smiles. They were not entirely happy. The young man and his companion often went apart and appeared to weep. I saw no cause for their unhappiness, but I was deeply affected by it. If such lovely creatures were miserable, it was less strange that I, an imperfect and solitary being, should be wretched. I dropped the book. Yet, why were these gentlemen unhappy? They possessed a delightful house, for such it was in my eyes, and every luxury. They had fire to warm them when chill, and delicious viands when hungry. They were dressed in excellent clothes, and still more, they enjoyed one another's company and speech, interchanging each day looks of affection and kindness. What did their tears imply? Did they really express pain? I was at first unable to solve these questions, but perpetual attention and time explained to me many appearances which were first enigmatic. A considerable period elapsed before I discovered one of the causes of the uneasiness of this amiable family. It was poverty, and they suffered that evil in a very distressing degree. Their nourishment consisted entirely of the vegetables in their garden and the milk of one cow, which gave very little during the winter, when its masters could scarcely produce food to support it. They often, I believe, suffered the pains of hunger very poignantly, especially the two younger cottagers. For several times they placed food before the old man, and they reserved none for themselves. This trait of kindness moved me sensibly. I had been accustomed during the night to steal a part of their store for my own consumption, but when I found out that doing this I inflicted pain on the cottagers, I abstained, and satisfied myself with berries, nuts, and roots, which I gathered from a neighboring wood. I discovered also another means through which I enabled to assist their labors. I found that the youth spent a great part of each day in collecting wood for the family fire, and, during the night, I often took his tools, the use of which I quickly discovered, and brought home firing sufficient for the consumption of several days. I remember the first time that I did this, the young woman, when she opened the door in the morning, appeared greatly astonished on seeing a great pile of wood on the outside. She uttered some words in a loud voice, and the youth joined her, who also expressed surprise. I observed with pleasure that he did not go to the forest that day, but spent it in repairing the cottage and cultivating the garden. By degrees, I made a discovery of still greater moment. I found that these people possessed a method of communicating their experience and feelings to one another by articulate sounds. I perceived that the words they spoke sometimes produced pleasure or pain, smiles or sadness in the minds and countenances of the heart of the hearers. It was indeed a godlike science, and I ardently desired to become acquainted with it. But I was baffled in every attempt I made for this purpose. Their pronunciation was quick, and the words they uttered not having any apparent connection with visible objects, I was unable to discover any clue by which I could unravel the mystery of their reference. By great application, however, and after being remained during the space of several revolutions of the moon in my hovel, I discovered the names that were given to some of the most familiar objects of discourse. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, bread, and wood. I learned also the names of the cottagers themselves. The youth and his companion had each of them several names, but the old man only had one, which was father. The girl was called sister or Agatha, and the youth Felix, brother or son. I cannot describe the delight I felt when I learned the ideas appropriated to each of these sounds, and I was able to pronounce them. I distinguished several other words. It is so hard to multitask. I distinguished several other words without being able as yet to understand or apply them, such as good, dearest, unhappy. I spent the winter in this manner distressed. When they rejoiced, I sympathized in their joys. I saw few human beings beside them, and if any other happened to enter the cottage, their harsh manners and rude gait only enhanced to me the superior accomplishments of my friends. The old man, I could perceive, often endeavored to encourage his children, as sometimes I found that he called them to cast off their melancholy. He would often talk in a cheerful accent, with an expression of goodness that bestowed pleasure even upon me. Agatha listened with respect, her eyes sometimes filled with tears, which she endeavored to wipe away unperceived. But I generally found that her countenance and tone were more cheerful after having listened to the exhortations of her father. It was not thus with Felix. He was always the saddest of the group, and, even to my unpracticed senses, he appeared to have suffered more deeply than his friends. But of his maintenance was more sorrowful. His voice was more cheerful than that of his sister, especially when he addressed the old man. Oh my god, don't read and drive, guys. It's only been an hour and 10 minutes. This is hard. Okay. I can mention innumerable instances which, although slight, mark the dispositions of these amiable cottagers. In the midst of poverty and want, Felix carried with pleasure to his sister the first little white flower that peeped out from beneath the snowy ground. Early in the morning, before she had risen, he cleared away the snow that obstructed her path to the milk house, drew water from the well, and brought the wood from the outhouse, where, to his perpetual astonishment, he found his store always replenished by an invisible hand. In the day, I believe, he worked sometimes for a neighboring farmer, because he often went forth, and did not return till dinner, yet brought no wood with him. At other times he worked in the garden, but, as there was little to do in the frosty season, he read to the old man and Agatha. This reading had puzzled me extremely at first, but, by degrees, I discovered that he uttered many of the same sounds when he read as when he talked. I conjectured, therefore, that he found on the paper signs for speech which he understood, and I ardently longed to comprehend these also. But how is that possible, when I did not even understand the sounds for which they stood as signs? I improved, however, sensibly in this science, but not sufficiently to follow up with any kind of conversation, although I applied my whole mind to the endeavor. For I easily perceived that, although I eagerly longed to discover myself to the cottagers, I ought not to make the attempt until I had first become master of their language, which knowledge might enable me to make them overlook the deformity of my figure. For with this, also the contrast perpetually presented to my eyes had made me acquainted. I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions. But how was I terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool? At first I stared back, unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror, and when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterness sensations of despondence and mortification. Alas, I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity. As the sun became warmer, and the light of day longer, the snow vanished, and I beheld the bare trees and the black earth. From this time Felix was more employed, and the heart-moving indications of impending famine disappeared. Their food, as I afterwards found, was coarse, but it was wholesome, and they procured a sufficiency of it. Several new kinds of plants sprung up in the garden, which they dressed, and these signs of comfort increased daily as the season advanced. Oh my god, I keep running out of breath and almost driving myself too far left off the road. The old man, leaning on his son, walked each day at noon, when it did not rain, as I found it was called when the heavens poured forth its waters. This frequently took place, but a high wind quiet... What the fuck word is that? Quietly? Quietly, what? Okay, that's not even a word. Okay, that's not a word. Got it. Quickly, maybe? Maybe it says quickly? I'll just go with that. But a high night wind quickly dried the earth, and the season became far more pleasant than it had been. My mode of life in my hovel was uniform. During the morning, I attended the motions of the cottagers, and when they disappeared in various occupations, I slept. The remainder of the day was spent in observing my friends. When they had retired to rest, if there was any moon or the night was starlight, I went into the woods and collected my own food and fuel for the cottage. When I returned, as often as it was necessary, I cleared their path from the snow and performed those offices that I had seen done by Felix. I afterwards found that these labors, performed by an invisible hand, greatly astonished them, and once or twice I heard them on these occasions utter the words, "Good spirit, wonderful," but I did not then understand the significance of these terms. My thoughts now became more active, and I longed to discover the motives and feelings of these lovely creatures. I was inquisitive to know why Felix appeared so miserable and Agatha so sad. I thought, foolish wretch, that it might be in my power to restore happiness to these deserving people. When I slept or was absent, the forms of the venerable blind father, the gentle Agatha, and the excellent Felix flitted before me. I looked upon them as superior beings who would be the arbiters of my future destiny. I formed in my imagination a thousand pictures of presenting myself to them, and their reception of me. I imagined that they would be disgusted until, by my gentle demeanor and conciliating words, I could win their favor and afterwards their love. These thoughts exhilarated me and led me to apply with fresh ardor to the acquiring the art of language. My organs were indeed harsh but supple, and although my voice was very unlike the soft music of their tones, yet I pronounced such words as I understood with tolerable ease. It was as the ass and the lapdog. Yet surely the gentle ass, whose intentions were affectionate, although his manners were rude, deserved better treatment than blows and the execration. The pleasant showers and genial warmth of spring greatly altered the aspect of the earth, and before this change seemed to have been hid in caves, dispersed themselves, and were being employed in various arts of cultivation. The birds sang in more cheerful tones, and the leaves began to move forth on the trees. Happy, happy earth, fit habitation for gods, which, so short a time before, was bleak, damp, and unwholesome. My spirits were elevated by the enchanting appearance of nature. The past was blotted from my memory, the present was tranquil, and the future glided by bright rays of hope and anticipations of joy. We're on to chapter 13, and it's only been 17 minutes. I read kind of fast. Hold on, I'm gonna drink some water. Oh, I don't know if anyone's chatted. I haven't been looking. Everybody look. No one has chatted. Awesome. Okay. Chapter 13. I now hasten to the more moving part of my story. I shall relate events that impressed me with feelings which, from what I had been, have made me what I am. Spring advanced rapidly. The weather became fine and the skies cloudless. It surprised me that what before was desert and gloomy should now bloom with the most beautiful flowers and verdure. My senses were gratified and refreshed by 1,000 sense of delight and 1,000 sights of beauty. It was on one of those days, when my cottagers periodically rested from labor, the old man played on his guitar and the children listened to him, that I observed the countenance of Felix was melancholy, beyond expression. He sighed frequently, and once his father paused his music, and I conjectured by his manner that he inquired the cause of his son's sorrow. Felix replied in a cheerful accent, and the old man was recommencing his music, when someone tapped at the door. It was a lady on horseback, accompanied by a countryman as a guide. The lady was dressed in a dark suit and covered with a thick black veil. Agatha asked a question to which the stranger only replied by pronouncing with a sweet accent the name of Felix. Her voice was musical, but unlike that of either of my friends. On hearing this word, Felix came up hastily to the lady, who, when she saw him, threw up her veil, and I beheld a countenance of angelic beauty and expression. Her hair of a shining raven black and curiously braided, her eyes were dark and gentle, although animated, her features of irregular proportion, and her complexion wondrously fair, each cheek tinged with a lovely pink. Felix seemed ravished with delight when he saw her. Every trait of sorrow vanished from his face, and it instantly expressed a degree of ecstatic joy, of which I could hardly have believed it capable. His eyes sparkled as his cheek flushed with pleasure, and at that moment I thought him as beautiful as the stranger. She appeared affected by different feelings. Wiping a few tears from her lovely eyes, she held out her hand to Felix, who kissed her rapturously, and called her, as well as I could distinguish, his sweet Arabian. She did not appear to understand him, but smiled. He assisted her to dismount, and dismissing her guide, conducted her into the cottage. Some conversation took place between him and his father, and the young stranger knelt at the old man's feet, and would have kissed his hand, but he raised her and embraced her affectionately. I soon perceived that, although the stranger uttered articulate sounds, and appeared to have a language of her own, she was neither understood nor, not herself understood, the cottagers. They made many signs which I did not comprehend, but I saw her presence diffused gladness through the cottage, dispelling their sorrow as the sun dissipates in the morning mists. Felix seemed particularly happy, and with smiles of delight welcomed his Arabian Agatha. The ever-gentle Agatha kissed the hands of the lovely stranger, and, pointing to her brother, made signs which appeared to me that she had been sorrowful until she came. Some hours passed thus, while they, by their countenances, expressed joy, the cause of which I did not comprehend. Presently I found, by the frequent recurrence of some sound which the stranger repeated after them, that she was endeavoring to learn their language, and the idea instantly occurred to me that I should make use of the same instructions to the same end. The stranger learned about 20 words of the first lesson. Most of them, indeed, were those which I had before understood, but I profited by the others. As night came on, Agatha and the Arabian retired early. When they separated, Felix kissed the hand of the stranger, who said, "Good night, sweet Safie." He sat up much longer, conversing with his father, and, by the frequent repetition of her name, I conjectured that their lovely guest was the subject of their conversation. I ardently desired to understand them, and bent every faculty towards that purpose, but found it utterly impossible. The next morning, Felix went out to his work, and, after the usual occupations of Agatha were finished, the Arabian sat at the feet of the old man, and, taking his guitar, played some airs so entrancingly beautiful that they monstered tears of sorrow and delight from my eyes. She sang, and her voice flowed in a rich cadence, swelling or drying away, like a nightingale of the woods. When she had finished, she gave the guitar to Agatha, who at first declined it. She played a simple air, and her voice accompanied it in sweet accents, but unlike the wondrous saying of the stranger, the old man appeared raptured, and said some words, which Agatha endeavored to explain to Safie, and by which he appeared to express that she bestowed on him the greatest delight by her music. The days now passed as peaceably as before, with the sole alteration that joy had taken place of sadness in the countenances of my friends. Safie was always gay and happy. She and I improved rapidly in the knowledge of language, and so that in 2 months I began to comprehend most of the words uttered by my protectors. In the meanwhile, also the black ground was covered with herbage, and the green banks interspersed with innumerable flowers, sent to the scent and the eyes, stars of pale radiance among the moonlight woods. The sun became warmer, the nights clear and balmy, and my nocturnal rambles were an extreme pleasure to me, although they were considerably shortened by the late setting and early rising of the sun, for I never ventured abroad during daylight, fearful of meeting with the same treatments I had formerly endured in the first village which I entered. My days were spent in close attention, that I might more speedily master the language, and I may boast that My days were spent in close close attention that I might more speedily master the language, and I may boast that I improved more rapidly than the Arabian, who understood very little and conversed in broken accents, whilst I comprehended and could imitate almost every word that was spoken. Wait, where am I at? While I improved in speech, I also learned the signs of letters as it was taught to the stranger, and this opened before me a wide field for wonder and delight. The book from which Felix instructed Safie was Volney's Ruins of Empires. I should not have understood the purport of this book had not Felix, in reading it, given every minute explanations. Given very minute explanations. He had chosen this work, he said, because the declamatory style was framed in imitation of the Eastern authors. Through this work, I obtained a cursory knowledge of history and a view of the several empires at present existing in the world. It gave me an insight into the manners, governments, and religions of the different nations of the earth. I heard of the slothful Asiatics, of the stupendous genius and mental activity of the Grecians, of the wars and wonderful virtue of the early Romans, of their subsequent degenerating, of the decline of the mighty empire, of chivalry, Christianity, and kings. I heard of the discovery of the American hemisphere. Yeah, okay, that is the right place. And wept with Safie over the hapless fate of its original inhabitants. These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man, indeed, at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared to be the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments, but when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. Almost like not being able to see where I'm at and just turning all the way off. Every conversation of the cottagers now opened new wonders to me, while I listened to the instructions which Felix bestowed upon the Arabian. The strange system of human society was explained to me. I heard of the division of property, of immense wealth and squalid poverty, of rank, descent, and noble blood. The words induced me to turn towards myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent Hold on. I can't read with that. Let me do this again. Restart this paragraph. The words induced me to turn towards myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied, decent, united with riches. A man might be respected with only one of these advantages, but without either he was considered exempt in very rare instances as a vagabond and a slave, doomed to waste his powers for the profits of the chosen few. And what was I? Of my creation and creator I was absolutely ignorant, but I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, and no kind of property. I was, besides, endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as man. Sorry. I was more agile than they, and could subsist upon coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I then a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled, and whom all men disowned? I cannot describe to you the agony that these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them. But sorrow only increased with the knowledge. I lost my place again. Oh, that I had forever remained in my native wood, nor known, nor felt beyond the sensations of hunger, thirst, and heat. Okay, I gotta go to the bathroom, so yeah, I'll be back in a second. I just gotta stop the bus first. If it would be so kind as to stop. Okay, I'll be right back. No, it's not stopped yet, but it's fine. Okay, I'm back. Just pick up my book, figure out where I was at, and then I'll get moving. Hold on. I gotta rearrange my desk so I can actually fit the book. Strange nature is knowledge. It clings. Oh my god, hold on. This is not working. There we go, that's better. Of what strange nature is knowledge? It clings to the mind when it has once seized on it, like a lichen on the rock. I wished sometimes to shake off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensation of pain, and that was death. A state which I feared yet did not understand. I admired virtue and good feelings, but loved the gentle manners and amiable qualities of my cottagers, but I was shut out from intercourse with them, except through means which I obtained by stealth, which I was unseen and unknown, and which rather increased than satisfied the desire I had of becoming one among my fellows. The gentle words of Agatha and the animated smiles of the charming Arabian were not for me. The mild exhortations of the old man and the lively conversation of the loved Felix were not for me. Miserable, unhappy wretch. Other lessons were impressed upon me even more deeply. I heard of the difference of sexes and the birth and growth of children. How the father doted on the smiles of the infant and the lively sallies of the older child. How all the life and cares of the mother were wrapped up in the precious charge. How the mind of youth expanded and gained knowledge of brother, sister, and all the various relationships which bind one human being to another in mutual bonds. But where were my friends and relations? No father had watched my infant days. No mother had blessed me with smiles and caresses. Or if they had, all my past life was now a blot, a blind vacancy in which I distinguished nothing. From my early remembrance, I had been as I then was in height and proportion. I had never yet seen a being resembling me, or who claimed any intercourse with me. What was I? The question again recurred, to be answered only with groans. I will soon explain to what these feelings tended, but allow me to now return to the cottagers, whose story excited in me such various feelings of indignation, delight, and wonder, but which all terminated in additional love and reverence for my protectors, for so I loved, in an innocent, half painful, half deceit to call them. Okay, then, chapter 4, I'm not going to read 14, we're on 14. I'm not going to read that right now. I want to find something that's easier to read and drive, because that is certainly not. I keep losing my place. And also, I'm not good at reading old books anyways. I'm not good at knowing the words. By the way, I'm not actually able to brake. The bus just kind of slows down on its own, and I have to wait for it to stop. So, yeah. Okay, I'm right back. I'm actually gonna take a break and make, I don't know, hot cocoa or something. So, yeah. Can't eat it yet, it's too hot, but... Oh, this is the stable theme? Yeah, it is. It's really good. It's just a chocolate mug cake, and then I threw some chocolate chips in there and kind of sort of mixed it. If I don't stop, I think I'll be able to make it to the end before I have to go. I should be able to finish it tonight regardless, unless I like take a really long break, which I might end up doing. This is the Tano Village theme, I think. Yup. Honestly, most of the best themes, or most of the best songs that came from Legend of Zelda came from Breath of the Wild. It's not the best game, but it is my favorite. I like Tears of the Kingdom. It's not amazing. I'm trying to get a hold of Majora's Mask, but I'm broke. So... I actually don't even know what platform it's on. Trying to think about what I'm gonna eat for dinner tonight. We're gonna go grocery shopping. Which is why I might have to go before I'm done. But sometimes my mom cancels, so I think if he cancels, I'll probably do, I don't know, chicken noodle soup or something. I ate mac and cheese 2 days in a row now, and I really don't want to. Like, I don't want to eat it again. I could do fried rice. That tastes good. Or I could just eat plain rice. That's less good, but doable. I wish that every once in a while a car would drive by you, you know? Let's watch Game Theory. I like some of the old stuff, not just because it's MatPat, but I just like old stuff. I don't like the pressure episode. They didn't put a lot of thought into it. Okay, let's watch the newest one.
Secret of the Mimic is finally here, and it changes everything. Our understanding of the books, our understanding of the timeline, and our understanding of the characters we've come to know over the last 11 years. But as always, I'm here to pull an Afton, or an Edwin, as it turns out, and put it all back together. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's jaw has been hanging open like a badly made Chica costume ever since the release of FNAF's Secret of the Mimic. And I'm not alone in that feeling. Every single YouTuber has been completely sideswiped by this game. Chica! I can't believe we got Chica! Hey! Oh my god, there she is! That's insane! Why has it taken us all by surprise? Well, besides the fact the game actually works, mostly, it also did something that is completely unheard of in a FNAF game. They actually gave us a story. And I don't mean the super cryptic kind that we have to spend years and years figuring out. I mean the kind that actually helps us move forward in this franchise. For a long time, the community has been frustrated with the lack of clarification out there for this series. It's been years of theory upon theory upon theory. And while we have come to certain agreements for parts of it, there are still massive sections of the lore that we haven't been able to agree on simply because there's never really been a solid foundation to jump off of. But now, after 11 years of this franchise, Secret of the Mimic came as the earliest entry in the FNAF timeline and said, guys, I got you. Giving us relatively clear breakdowns of how the early years of Fazbear came to be, as well as throwing a bunch of hand cranks into the works that make us question everything we knew about this franchise. There's timelines that have been displaced, character personas completely shattered, and understandings of where the future of this franchise is going totally flipped on its head. And I intend to theorize about all of it in a 3-part series across the next month or so, focusing on the 3 main characters from this new game: the newcomer Edwin Murray and his family, the big bad Mimic, and, of course, Fazbear Entertainment, William Afton, and Henry. All of that will then be followed up with a live talkback with a bunch of other FNAF theorists to discuss the game, our differing theories, and generally just talking about the franchise that we've all enjoyed for so long. Dates for that are TBD right now, so make sure you're subscribed so that when I do announce it, you'll be the first to know, and to make sure you don't miss all of the crazy theories leading up to it, because believe me, you don't want to miss them. There are some real bombshells in this game that I want to explore. But for now, let's start from the beginning. We jump into the game as a lowly burly mechanic working for the wonderful as always Fazbear Entertainment. Our name is Arnold, and we've just gotten off of a 36-hour shift, only to be called in for one last job to help recover some Fazbear assets from one of their contractors, Edwin Murray. Begrudgingly, we head to Murray's Costume Manor, only to discover the asset is a set of blueprints for a killer animatronic endoskeleton that can fit into any costume and learn the role of any character or person, the Mimic. We gain access to different areas of the facility by upgrading our data diver with different permissions, from basic to security, repair, all the way up to executive privileges, all while trying to outrun or outweight the Mimic.
He's going for it.
Eventually, we get our hands on the blueprints, only to discover that it wasn't Fazbear talking to us through dispatch. It was the Mimic pretending to be them to get their hands on the data diver. This leads to one of three endings where we either escape and get killed by the Mimic, we escape and get killed by the Mimic, or we fix the Mimic and then just stand there watching it sleep. Now, these guys deserve an episode of their own, because whichever one is canon could have massive implications that I just don't have time to get into right now. Instead, let's turn our attention to the stuff we can discover during the game, and the first of our big three characters, Edwin Murray. If you're a longtime viewer of this channel, or you're one of the people who understands my pain and has actually read the books, then that name isn't anything new. Edwin Murray is a character that we were introduced to in both the Storyteller and the Mimic from the Tales from the Peterplex series. His company was bought out by Fazbear. He created the Mimic to babysit his son David, but his son tragically died. And because the Mimic kept mimicking his dead son, he beat the thing up, teaching it violence, and then showed up 40 years later trying to stop it. However, when The Secret of the Mimic's creative director Evan Lampe said to Dorco,
"If you've read the books, you don't know the full story."
he wasn't kidding. The story of Edwin goes so much deeper and is so much more tragic than we could have ever realized. As Arnold explores Murray's Costume Manor, we can find audio recordings and mailboxes containing digital text logs that give us the real story of what happened to this place. It was originally owned by Edwin's father, who we'll call Murray Sr. Edwin Murray works for him.
Edwin Murray. This is my dad's place.
You know, because nepotism. But Edwin is the quirky inventor type, and to test out his new voice recorder creation, he seeks out one of the new employees and former puppeteers.
Excuse me, can I borrow your voice for a project?
Oh, what for? I don't even know you. I'm brand new here. Let's start again. I'm Fiona.
Murray Sr. then passes away and leaves the whole thing to Edwin, who rebrands everything to bring his wacky inventions to life.
Maybe rebrand? We could start making some of my inventions for real.
Together with Fiona, they invent a bunch of wild tech, like a coffee machine that can learn your coffee preferences to make the perfect cup, a coat hanger that can adjust to any size you need, and an adorable vacuum cleaner. Oh, just look at him with his tiny little brooms and his little dumpy. Anyway, alongside this, he is also making a bunch of costumes, which I suppose makes sense given that's the name of the business. But the characters we see are interesting if you're a FNAF fan. We see a handful of characters that you might recognize, like Pirate and Cowgirl Roxy, Hillbilly Monty, a puppet pirate Foxy, and the big one, a rollerblading costume of Chica.
It is. That's freaking Chica.
Let's party.
She really was the first, wasn't she? But besides Chica, who Edwin and Fiona were specifically hired to make for a client, Chica's Party World, yes, that Chica's Party World, all of these other characters were rentable or purchasable from Murray's Costume Manor, meaning Edwin owned these characters. They weren't originally Fazbear's. However, Fazbear was around as another one of Edwin's clients, taking interest in his technological genius, even to the point where Edwin refers to Henry as simply Hen in the audio logs, presumably because they have a level of familiarity and friendship thanks to their shared technological creativity.
I got the change order from Hen last night. They don't think of me as a friend anymore.
But the real tragedy of Edwin comes from when we look at his family. I've mentioned his wife Fiona, but he also has a son named David, just like he did in the Tales from the Peterplex book series. Unlike that series though, Fiona doesn't die in childbirth. She's still around during David's early years, until she tragically passes away, leaving Edwin to run the business and raise David all on his own, leading Edwin to come up with the only logical solution: build an animatronic that can babysit David, obviously. He creates the M1 mimic. But something strange happens. It begins to not just look after David, but mimic Edwin's dead wife, Fiona. The family is back together again, until it's not. One day, David dies outside the facility, leaving Edwin completely devastated. At the same time, the business is completely crumbling around him. But M1 Fiona has a solution: make another one of her.
Edwin, you can't put it off any longer. You need to try again. Build another.
Make another mimic that would now mimic David so that they could be together again. Edwin isn't convinced at first, but eventually he gives in. He takes M1 out of the endoskeleton, copies the program, and creates M2, putting the new program into the endoskeleton. And it works. M2 begins acting like David, but it's too much for Edwin to handle, and he snaps, beating the animatronic, breaking its legs, and teaching it the valuable lesson of violence that Arnold now gets to experience firsthand. With that failure under his belt and the business still struggling, Edwin locks himself away with his final Fazbear project, a restaurant called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. But M2 has other plans. It destroys the house, and Edwin is never seen or heard from again. It's a real sad ending, but you see what I mean about how it upends a lot of what we thought we knew. We've got characters we thought were Fazbears now created by someone else. We've got a wildly different setup to Edwin and his family than we saw in the books, and this is just the top level stuff that's been given to us on a plate. The more you dig into these things, the more things begin to change and shift our understanding of the entire franchise. But we've got some time, so let's keep things simple for now. We've been given a bunch of information about Edwin, his family, and his company. But what is the timeline of these events? This is FNAF after all. Timelines are a staple for FNAF theorists everywhere. And I don't just mean a vague order of events. I mean cold, hard dates. Well, as you might expect, this game is pretty careful to leave those sorts of details hidden, only giving us months or days for dates at best. They even block out years so we can't place exact details. But when has that ever stopped us before? Let's start with the very first teaser for this game. In it, we saw the number 1979 showing up on a film reel, giving us a pretty good indication that that was when this game would take place. And once we boot up the game, that does seem to still be the case. In Arnold's van, we come across his work order to collect an endoskeleton from Murray's Costume Manor. The job he is literally on. That work order contains both an issue date and a signing date, which both end up being the same date, September 7th, 1979. I suppose that means that the mimic not only faked Dispatch's voice, but also sent a fake work order? And wait, does that mean that Arnold has a fax machine hidden in this van? What other mysteries does this van hold? Oh, Arnold, you teasing enigma. So, okay, we have the end of our timeline for this game, but as I've kind of already mentioned, that's like the least interesting part of this game's story. We're really here for the Edwin Murray drama. But don't worry, I think we can figure that one out too, thanks to FNAF's longest running trope: dead kids. Well, kid, specifically his son, David Murray. Wait, you're not David Murray, you're Jafufu, the newest S-rank agent from today's sponsor, Zenless Zone Zero. Zenless Zone Zero is a
Hello, watching this video will take 60 minutes of your time and leave you with a bunch of useless information about Breath of the Wild that I'd sure as hell be excited about if I were in your shoes. Let's go. It's been established that you can't pet dogs in this game, but they sometimes randomly give off little pink clouds of affection just for being near you. And if you put away your weapon and press Y or R, Link will do this little animation where he tries to pull out his weapon and then he looks confused because he didn't pull anything out. If you do this next to a dog until it lets out one of these little pink clouds of affection, then it'll give this nice little illusion that you're actually petting the dog. Whenever the game gets confused about elixirs, specifically if it thinks a regular cooked meal with no special properties is an elixir, it'll turn it into a cute little ice cream cone. Several players randomly discovered and documented this in the early days after the game's release, but it wasn't understood back then. When Nintendo realized players were experiencing this, they quickly patched the glitch. Today we understand the game much better and not only can we work around that patch, but we also know exactly how to trick the game up with a simple cooked meal and an elixir with a glitch known as inventory slot transfer, aka the infinite stuff trick, or
It's gonna drag us
IST
all the
for
way back
short.
to the
Fellow
start.
YouTuber Futurelander made a quick how-to video that I've linked in the description just in case you want to take Link down to the beach or somewhere and give him a snack on a hot summer day. When Link is out of stamina, he can still do a charged spin attack, he's just slower like everything else when you're out of stamina. He'll give it all he's got, which isn't much, and the animation has him stumbling around, kind of reminiscent of the way that he stumbles around right before he falls in the memory cutscene. The translucent terrain that Link cannot climb on in Hebra Mountain is not a glacier or ice material as I mistakenly referred to it in the 30-minute video. It's glass created from incinerated rock from a stray Divine Beast laser beam shot that cooled down rapidly out here in the climate. Makes sense
Okay,
because
how
glass is one
about
of the
I
few things that Link
just
cannot climb up in
do-
this game, so at least they stayed consistent. If you run around while wearing one
We'll
of
just do
Tilton's
Kinito
monster
Pet.
masks, Link makes noises that mimic those of each monster. The Bokoblin, Moblin, and Lionel all have distinct grunts, while the Lizalfos makes the
Oh my
iconic
God, don't
poking
crash.
sound. The grunts are subtle and easy to miss.
Come on, you can launch. Nope. It's just not wanting to work. Okay, hold on, let me download it again. Nope, what the hell?
But the Lizalfos noises are slightly more audible.
I guess I'm just gonna upload
People
what I
have used the
now.
Hero's Path feature to create